This is not supposed to be the fast bike. This should be slow in this test. Really, it should be.
Yeah.
But it is so comfortable.
Yeah.
It is so comfortable.
Hello, I'm the freshest in the place. Running laps with my vibe and you can't keep the pace. Head to toe while I'm dripping in style. I'm fly with $1 million smile.
Had a really good breakfast at a diner nearby. Got a little greasy, but like, yeah, grease is fuel.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Velo Field Test, where we are here in beautiful Marin County in Northern California, where we are doing a field test of all-road bikes. Behind us, however, is not an all-road bike. At least we don't think it's an all-road bike. It's a Specialized Aethos. Opinions are kind of divided on it, as I've alluded to. We had someone who actually works at a Specialized dealer call this an all-road bike. We don't think so, as the geometry of Specialized's own race bike. And we think that it's just a race bike, just focused on being as light as possible. And if you look at it, it's comparatively bare to the other bikes here. It has a standard stem, standard headset, standard bottom bracket, round seat post. It's just a fast road bike really distilled into like the simplest package possible. That being said, why did we include this in the Velo Field Test?
I mean, the whole point here was that we wanted to get a contrast and a point of comparison. It's like in an experiment when you're control, you want to be able to draw the differences out. And so this is meant to show the extreme on one side. And we specifically chose not the tarmac because that is like a race bike. But this sort of competes with just having fun, but in a completely different way than the all-road bikes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of saying that. And with that being said, we should talk about how it handles, which is completely different than these all-road bikes, right? So tell me about how it handles and how it is in comparison to the all-road bike that you rode back-to-back with.
So the point that this really became clear to me was when we did half the ride and then we switched. So I had been on the Roubaix, and at the turnaround point, I switched to this one. I was then asked to descend in high winds, and this thing is twitchy and a little scary. It will move around on you in the wind, and while I generally like that it is so direct, and the handling is like, you point it where you want it to go with your hands. You can add it to it with your hips or not. Just your hands is enough to make this go right where you want it to go. But I will tell you that there is a drawback to that, and it is that it is not stable. There are situations where it can scare you a little bit, and it definitely did in that wind.
Yeah, so that wind, to be clear, was a lot of rollers, and it was very bare. Do you feel that twitchiness when you're climbing? And what about descending?
So you do feel the twitchiness a little bit when you're climbing. And even on the flats, it's like, I have this thing that I like to test. Can I hold the white line on the edge of the road? And with the Aethos, it likes to wander a little bit. And you get that in the climbing too. On the climbing, I think over time you might get used to it, but it's just so shockingly light when you move the bike under you, it sort of will go farther than you expect it to. And yeah, so in whatever situation you put it into, there's a lot going on. It is moving a lot. This is not a bike that disappears under you.
Yeah, that is interesting considering how little is going on with the rest of the frame. That the ride experience, the handling, there's a lot going on. What about ride comfort?
I think the best way to talk about the ride comfort on this is that it almost feels like you've gone down a tire size, like from a 30 to a 28. And when you're riding on something that is rough, you are acutely aware that this is not the best tool for the job. Now, I also do want to tell a little bit of a story about this, and which is that I took this bike out for a bonus ride. I took it along the coast in just absolutely gorgeous California coastline, and there's a road that's fairly rough, and it's changing directions a lot, up, down, left, right. And this is the bike that you want to be on. It is so much fun. It pulls you, and when you're tired, it says sprint. Whatever you're doing, this bike wants you to go harder and faster, and it is so much fun. And yet, the whole time I'm thinking, this is maybe not the most efficient choice for this situation. And I think that's what you get with the Aethos, is that it's maybe not the best choice, but you still want to make it.
Yeah, so I do have a question for you here, because I have been of the mindset Specialized Aethos comes really close to being what I consider to be an ideal all-road bike. It just needs a lot more stack height because it's got tarmac stack height. Do you think the additional stack height here would make the bike more comfortable?
I mean, a stack height always makes it more comfortable. If you shorten up a bike and you raise the handlebars, that's gonna make it more comfortable to more people. I do wonder if you would lose a little bit of the personality of this bike, because that is kind of the thing that sets it aside from an all-road bike, is that it's a more extreme position on the bike, so you do feel more connected to it. So what would that do if you were to raise it up? But it is, I mean, it's worth noting that that's one of the reasons that we included it, is that it's so close and yet so different at the same time.
Yeah, I would say it is pretty stiff riding, and like having your bars up a little bit higher doesn't fully fix that, as much as I would hope it does. Okay, so we've talked about handling, we've talked about ride quality and comfort. Let's talk about the build kit right here, which this is obviously an S-Works bike. This is not the same tier as the other bikes we've had here at the Velo Field Test, right?
It is hard to complain about this. This is the new SRAM Red, and the levers are incredible. Everything about this build kit is absolutely top notch. But that said, if you were to go down, you would lose very little. If you go to Ultegra, I've said it again, you know, here, I've said it over and over, you're losing nothing going down to that. It is still an incredible group set. And then in terms of the carbon of the bike itself, it will get a little bit heavier in the lower models, but it's so shockingly light. At 6.4 kilograms, it is like crazy how light it is. So even if you add a little bit of a few grams as you go down in the model lineup, you're not really gonna notice. I mean, that's a number on a spec sheet. It just doesn't matter. You're gonna get most of what we're talking about, that feeling, you're gonna get in whatever build kit is on there.
I think it's worth mentioning that, as you said, a lot of the things that we liked about that Roubaix, as far as the build kit is concerned, you get on the same level of Aethos. However, the Aethos is cheaper than that Roubaix, just because it doesn't have all those flourishes.
I mean, that's crazy. Yeah. That is crazy, because when this bike came out, I mean, it was a range topper. And even now, one of the things about riding this bike is you're on an S-Works Aethos, everyone notices. You are not flying under the radar with this bike, and you're gonna wanna think about that. How is that gonna affect how you interact out in the world with this bike? And so to hear that it's actually less money than the Roubaix, I mean, that's pretty crazy. But it's, you know, tool for the job. Which do you prefer?
All right, on to livability with this bike, the Specialized Aethos. This one's the S-Works model, and I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10, which is just below the Lauf Utald that we have here on review as well. You could probably guess why this bike is getting as high a score as it is, and that's because this bike has a reputation for being refreshingly simple. You have an external seat post clamp, the threaded bottom bracket, the standard stem, standard spacer, standard bar, the external brake hoses. It's all simple to the point of it looking even slightly outdated. Making adjustments here is also fairly straightforward. The brake posts look finished well enough, and we didn't have any issues adjusting the brake calipers here. And the finishing bits here are also of high quality, commensurate with the price point. On that note, I'm also a big fan of the Reval Alpinist CLX wheels here. They have DT Swiss hub internals, which makes it easy to find replacement parts for, and it's easy to service overall. That being said, I did find that these wheels were fairly hard to set up with our Control Continental tubeless tires, requiring multiple shots of air to be seated on the hooked bead rims. I should also mention that the SRAM Red Access brakes here, while they are my favorite brakes in the road world at the moment, they also require a dot fluid, which whenever you need to dispose it is going to be much tougher to dispose of compared to a standard mineral oil in a Shimano or Campagnolo brake. So I'm giving this bike a 9 out of 10. Why not a 10 out of 10 though, you might ask? And it's one thing, and this is what makes that score a little bit subjective, and it's because I worry about cracking the frame, particularly if it hits a square edge. This frame is really light. It's far and away the lightest frame here on test, and it's far and away one of the lightest frames you can find, but that means that carbon is exceptionally thin. And while Specialized says to not worry about the durability of this frame compared to its other carbon frames, inherently I will worry about it a little bit more. If you were to get this frame, 9 out of 10. If you were to get the standard modulus 10R carbon, I'd go as far as give it a 10 out of 10 because you can use mechanical drivetrains with that bike. let's start with pros and cons. Pros.
Yeah, so the pros, I mean, right away you have to say lightweight. There's no way that you can talk about this bike and not just talk about how incredibly light it is. And then along with that is that this bike is meant as a reimagining of classic road bikes. So you'll have to decide if that's pro for you, but these is round tubes and everything is sort of what you think about when you think about a classic road bike. That's an aesthetic thing, but that's important when you're thinking about buying a bike. The other thing about that, along with it being round tubes and like a classic aesthetic, is that everything is very simple. There's not a bunch of proprietary parts. It's not through the head tube routing. Everything is easy to work on. Everything is easy to change. This is a bike that is very easy to live with in terms of usability and, you know, working on it.
Yeah, this is a bike, as you said, very easy to live with. And at some point we gotta start putting our money where our mouths are, right? Like, we gotta encourage more bikes like this. What about the cons?
So the cons, there's a couple things. One, the max tire size on this is 32 millimeters. Now, this isn't an all-road bike, despite what people may think.
Yeah.
So in some ways that makes sense. But at the same time, even a lot of all-out race bikes are coming with wider tires at this point. And so that's one of the things where you can see that this frame is a little bit older. Your max tire size is 32. The other thing to keep in mind about this frame as a negative is that because of how light it is and because of the geometry, it's going to move around on you. This is not a bike that you're going to be like, oh wow, this is stable and comforting. This is a bike that talks to you all the time. It is constantly doing things under you, and you're going to need to pay attention. In some ways that's good, but you definitely want to know what you're getting into.
Yeah. Okay, last question, Josh. Let's say someone is looking to buy a bike. Should they buy this, specifically an Aethos, or more just generally a go-fast bike over a regular all-road bike?
Absolutely not, unless you want to have the most fun possible at the expense of what is best for you, what fits you best, what is the most comfortable. Like, a bike like this, the decision is not about what is best and the exact right tool for the job. It is about having fun. This is a heart decision.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of saying it, that those all-road bikes aren't necessarily a heart decision. There is some pragmatism to it. This is purely heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, everyone, that's our review of the Specialized Aethos. Stay tuned for more reviews in this Velo Field Test here in sunny and somewhat noisy Marin County. See you on the next one.